Hello all, I'm a new up here, traveler of the new age. Recently, this long-awaited Gravity 1 finally launched its second flight, a full year and 9 months after its debut. What a tough road it's had. Today we'll dive deep into talking about the world's mightiest solid rocket, Gravity 1, and the Orien Space story behind it. Let's see what this firm is all about with three-way tug-of-war inside and how you'd be outside. The initial core team of Orien Space had 4 Yao Song, Peng Kaomin, Bu Xiangwei, and Wei Kai. Among them, Wei Kai as Co just kept doing his job. No extra drama there, while the other 3 would later act out a 3-way tug-of-war. So here we'll give a special intro to Yao Song, who among the 3 handled the fundraising role and gained more public recognition. He was born in 1992 and got into Tsinghua University's EE department in 2011. Later, while visiting Stanford University, he met a classmate named Peng Haoming there. After graduation, Yao Song jumped right into entrepreneurship, founding DeFi-Tech in 2015. After 3 rounds of funding in 2.5 years, they sold the firm to Xilinx, then launched their second startup, which gave rise to our Orien Space story today. When he started this venture, he brought aboard old classmate Peng Haoming. Then they ran into an awkward problem. Neither had a background in aerospace and knew little about it. Plus, by then it was already 2020, and other space firms had started launching rockets one by one. So 2 folks who knew no space just jumped in. How the heck are they gonna make it then? But they had their own plan, one hinging on Peng Haoming's old man, though she's not in aerospace. Her dad Peng Kun-ya was CZ11's chief designer. So here come folks who know the space game, thanks to his dad's know-how and contacts. Orien Space lured top talent away from CAS. Besides, isn't there also Bu Xiangwei in their funding team, right? He worked on the Long the 11th of March team before, as the chief structural engineer there. After joining Orien Space's founding team, he began swaying his old colleagues with heartfelt talks and logic, luring in more talent that way. Even Wei Kai was brought in by him. He was part of the Long the 11th of March team too, as head of the project office. Thus, the Long the 11th of March core team effectively went public here at Orien Space in a shell company kind of way. On the 9th of June 2020, after Orien Space officially formed, they began unveiling their rocket plans to secure funding and push R&D forward. Orien Space's rocket proposal became the later Gravity series rockets. Interestingly, earlier private space firms than Orien Space often preferred to launch a small rocket first to prove their launch capabilities, to attract investment and then develop mid-sized rockets like the Falcon 9. And private space firms later than Orien Space couldn't afford the time to dawdle like that, you see? So they often start by building mid-sized rockets like Falcon 9. But Orien Space itself is stuck in between, caught right here. If they started with big rockets, the payload capacity is just 4 to 6 tons or so. If you say he built a small rocket to raise funds, well, he just went all out and made the world's largest solid fuel rocket. Not even in the same league as those small rockets. In fact, Orien Space could pull off a world first right away, cause few others were competing in the pure solid rocket arena. You see, this 4 to 6 ton payload makes it top ranked for solid rockets worldwide, but in liquid rockets it's just the lower end of medium lift launch vehicles. Orien Space chose to build this solid rocket with such thrust based mainly on their prior judgment. Given the situation then, small solid rockets in China had grown quite mature, so raising funds via such projects had grown much harder. But starting with medium-sized liquid rockets is tough, takes long, and risks are just too high. Based on their assessment then, future large-scale LEO satellite constellations would need at least 4 tons of payload. So they ultimately chose to build Gravity 1, a rocket with 6.5 tons LEO capacity. A solid rocket with 4.2 tons to 500 kilometers sun-synchronous orbit. Once the rocket size was set, the next step was to define its design, Gravity 1. This rocket sure catches the eye at first glance. This big-headed kid looks like it came right out of KSP. Why does it look so goofy? Though, the core is just 2 things, a stocky frame and a giant head on top. Gravity 1 has a 4.2 meters wide fairing, over 9 meters tall in height. With over 100 cubic meters inside, it was China's largest private fairing at the time. This gives Gravity 1 its massive big head, you see. But why's it got this short, stout, stocky physique then? This is mainly because Gravity 1 added 4 boosters tied around, with same diameter as core stage to boost liftoff thrust. Solid rockets can boost thrust by staging boosters in series or parallel. Each one on Gravity 1 is about 10 meters long. If arranged in series, these 4 boosters would stretch 40 meters long. Plus Gravity 1 itself is about 30 meters long, so total length hits 70. But Gravity 1's core stage and boosters have just 2.65 meters diam, giving a length to diam ratio of 26. As thin as a rod, a light breeze might snap it right in two. Plus Gravity 1 is meant to sea launch. If small winds and waves rock the boat, it could just get kicked right into the sea. So Gravity 1 ultimately chose to cluster 4 boosters side by side, bringing the height down below 30 meters. So it ended up with this short, stocky look that's quite unique among all the private rockets out there. Then Orien Space used this thing to lure in investors, and folks from all over were quite on board, thinking this gadget would surely make waves ahead. Among these investors, one stood out the most. It's MiHoYo, who's got more to say than rockets do. Later, this got spread by the ACG and game community, and soon from MiHoYo investing in a rocket firm, it turned to MiHoYo building rockets. Just look at what HoYo did. By that logic, if I buy some shares in a firm, that company would be mine then. So all the company founders are fragile folks, just gave the firms to me. Unfortunately, such explosive rumors spread the fastest of all. The related video still holds top views among all Orien Space videos, the only one to break 1 million plays and even trended on Hot Search that year. You say MiHoYo was just better, right? In any case, after securing funds, Orien Space quickly launched the R&D and production of Gravity 1. Well, since the solid engines for Gravity 1 were all bought straight from the Academy of Aerospace Solid Propulsion Technology, just assemble them yourself, so the R&D wasn't too tough. The 4 boosters of YO1 each produce over 150 tons thrust, burn for 97 seconds. The central first stage used an SR2500 engine with max thrust of 255 tons. ABG thrust during flight is 235 tons, burn time 85 SEC. Hey, look here, these boosters run longer than the first stage's burn duration. So wouldn't that mean once the cores all burn, the 4 boosters still gotta drag that hollow core up there then? Which genius came up with this design? Well, they've got their own trick. Orien Space's solution is, at liftoff, not to ignite the first stage first. First, let the 4 boosters around it fly a bit, then fire first once, then the rest, before all engines power up after some time. At this point, someone's sure to say, so the difference here is just that 4 boosters drag an already burned out first stage that can provide thrust, and 4 boosters dragging a stage that's not lit yet but also not producing thrust. So in the end, some time gets wasted either way. But in truth, there's no other choice, since Gravity 1's thrust is just way too big, not like some soldiers' accidental flimsy liftoff power. Gravity 1's launch mass is over 400 tons, yet its liftoff thrust already tops 600 tons, giving a thrust-to-weight ratio of 1.5. That's high. If Stage 1 fires at liftoff, the thrust would hit over 800 tons, with a thrust-to-weight ratio above 2. Excessive thrust and high thrust-to-weight ratio can damage the hull and risk the satellite. If we reinforce the rocket's frame, we'd add extra weight, which might end up being a bad trade. So Orien Space finally chose a simple and effective approach, just shut down one engine at launch to solve the problem outright. Gravity 1's second stage has a 2.65 meters diameter, with a solid engine averaging 112 tons thrust and 90 seconds burn time. The third stage is a solid engine with 1.4 meters diameter, 18.3 ton thrust, and 52-second burn time. Online, there's also a small liquid engine made by Orien Space for attitude control. In the plan, Grav 1 also has a proposal to swap Stage 3 for liquid oxygen kerosene propulsion. Now, this would make Gravity 1's height grow from 230 meters to 36 meters, with a 5-ton boost in launch mass. The 500 kilometers SO payload can rise from 4.2 to 5.9 tons. Starting in 2022, the development of Gravity 1 began to speed up. In Augie, their self-made attitude control engine passed test started by month's end. The first stage engine test fired. Mid-sept saw the booster engine tested too. In the following June to August of 2023, Gravity 1 completed Stage 1 to 2 separation and Stage 2 to 3 separation tests, booster separation test, avionics system test, and interstage section vibration test among key tasks. On the 4th of August 2023, the Gravity 1 Yaoyi rocket for maiden flight began final assembly. In August of that year, the fairing separation test was done, and in deck they did the rocket ship joint drills at sea. Gravity 1 is all set to launch. At that time, Orien Space still planned to launch Gravity 1's maiden flight by late 2023. But sadly, that winter snow was a bit too heavy, as the end-of-year blizzard pushed Gravity 1's maiden flight to January 2024. This maiden flight was also live-streamed by Orien Space, marking the first time in China's private space history. This live used China Unicom 5G signals, delivering excellent broadcast results, such as In short, on the 11th of January 2024, Gravity 1 launched from Dongfang Spaceport in Haiyang Yantai Shandong. Its maiden flight succeeded aboard the launch ship there. After this success, Orien Space earned a ton of titles, including but not limited to IOE, the world's largest solid launch vehicle, China's largest private launch vehicle, China's first commercial rocket with strap-on boosters, the world's first sea launch rocket with strap-on boosters as well, world's first sea launch rocket using triple vertical launch mode, largest Minqi rocket with biggest fairing in China, China's first rocket with inflatable flexible protective cover, and first with strap-on boosters that don't ignite at liftoff, and so on and so on. Whether gold content's high or low, the title count's maxed out. Those who don't know might just get scared to death at a glance. This maiden flight was sponsored by HLA with HLA logos painted on the rocket's skin. The payload of this maiden flight, besides 3 satellites, also includes a 3-ton cargo ship model from Orien Space. Fully validated its payload capacity, no empty claims there. Plus, some commemorative items were aboard. This maiden flight went smoothly, except the thrust at launch was a bit too strong, wrecking some onboard gear. Plus, later when payload separated, telemetry briefly lost track of the target, but that was minor stuff. Looking at China's private space scene, 朱雀3 Kent Hao, 梁子天龙 still feels so far. Orien Space held China's largest private launch vehicle, riding high with all the buzz. In their plans for 2024, they aim to launch the Gravity 1 many times. Back in early June of that year, YO1 boarded a ship for deep-sea drills, paving the way for future deep-sea launches and expanded launch zones. But later, we all found out through all of 2024, Orien Space never did a second launch at all. Why so? To put it short, issues popped up everywhere. FROM payloads to rockets, launch sites, and internal ops and HR management.
Oh, we're back!
The main problem likely came from inside Orien Space itself. Put simply, throughout all of 2024, their company had constant infighting, the worst in private aerospace for sure. By the time they were done bickering, rivals had nearly finished their liquid rockets. In fighting pros, out-fighting fools. The co-players in this field are the 3 we mentioned at first, Yao Song, Peng Haoming, and Bu Xiangwei, in their 3-way tug-of-war. In theory, Yao Song, as the earliest founder and co-CEO, often took center stage in public outreach events, so the company should have been under his control. But the problem is, he just doesn't know space tech. Compared to Peng Haoming with family ties and Bu Xiangwei from a space background, Yao Song as a space company leader had a rather weak foundation in aerospace. So later on, Yao Song could mostly just raise funds and do promotion. The actual control within the firm had slowly shifted to Peng Haoming in later interviews. He openly stated that Yao Song was just the fundraising lead. By December 2024, Yao Song had been nearly completely booted out. As he was pushed out, Bu Xiangwei, who was the CTO, was made chairman and the CEO of the company. As chief engineer of the Gravity series rockets, Bu Xiangwei is among the top space experts at Orien Space. Along with these role changes, many other key members of Orien Space were purged in a major shakeup. In the end, Orien Space had a major shakeup. The original founding team had just 1 left. Well, some clever folks here might have noticed, hey, you said the original team had just 1 left, but didn't Peng Haoming and Bu Xiangwei stay on too? They ain't Siamese twins, that's 2 folks, not 1. How can the founding team be just a single soul? Maybe they counted only Peng Haoming and Yao Song as the original co-founders then. So the media reports just said it like that. As for deeper messages on Orien Space, we can't get much more. Some reports also claim that Yao Song and Peng Haoming were not just classmates but also a couple. Orien Space's staff had no food yet, but gossip till they were full. Yeah, these are just unofficial history. Folks, just listen, don't take it serious. In short, after all these upheavals, Orien Space achieved almost nothing for the rest of 2024. Wasted their best chance in time, and by the time they caught on rivals, mid to large rockets were already primed and ready to go. Gravity 1 no longer holds its path advantage. Plus, due to all the internal turmoil, investors grew increasingly skeptical of Orien Space's future. Among top domestic private space firms, Orien Space had the lowest valuation rank. Later, MiHoYo put out 2-0, more MiHoYo drinks to Seipi. Oh, and MiHoYo once got a Gravity 1 model from Orien Space as a gift. You see that model placed up top right on this coaster. That's a fun little tidbit to note. Time then arrived at 2025, when Orien Space finally began prepping for launch of Gravity 1 No. 2. So this rocket then faced payload issues and launch site problems in turn. This second Gravity 1 rocket picked a great launch site that year. They originally planned to bring Gravity 1 to Dandong for launch. Right, that Dandong, you're thinking of the 2nd largest city in the world that Dandong hails from. Later, after some thought, if launch from Dandong, the orbit would head south. This meant Gravity 1 would fly right over the sun, then after first stage burnout, debris would fall on South Korea. That's just too thrilling, yeah. Let us not do it like that, just go back to Haiyang, our old launch site.
Yeah.
Through all this back and forth, IO1 saw 2025's first half pass, with time just slipping away once more. Until the 11th of October 2025, Gravity 1 finally completed its second launch at long last. By then, it had been a full year and 9 months since its first flight. On the morning of the 11th of October 2025, the Gravity 1 Yar HLA rocket launched, placing 3 satellites into planned orbits. This launch faced bad weather, so despite alive, the rocket vanished into the clouds soon after liftoff, not much to see. Later, the rocket's plume set a boat on fire, but that didn't matter. It didn't affect mission success. Once upon a time, Gravity 1 hit a scene and peaked right away, dominating China's private space market with ease. But times have changed. Today's Gravity 1 lacks its former day's fierce might. Orien Space wants to move ahead, must offer a more competitive product. That's Gravity 2. Compared to Gravity 1, which looked striking and unique at first glance, Gravity 2's looks are rather plain and unremarkable. If there's anything stand out, it's that Gravity 2 can opt to carry the same boosters as Gravity 1 on both its sides, and adds a touch of flair to its plain, ordinary look. The development of Gravity 2 is still underway. As for the story of Gravity 2 and its 4 series engines built by Orien Space, we'll share it all with you on Gravity 2's maiden flight day, no doubt. That's all for this episode of the video then. If you liked what you saw, please give it likes, coins, follow, and favorite. This is New Century Traveler, a new up主. See you in the next episode.